Bradamante, Knight of Charlemagne, the white-feathered knight, and the most dedicated love interest I have ever seen. But what about the Bradamante of Fate Grand Order? How well does she compare to her mythical counterpart? And what grade would I give her depiction? Let's get into it. Bradamante is a Lancer-class servant, which is a solid pick for her. Bradamante is regularly depicted wielding a lance, white armor, and a white shield, often from horseback. Actually, for about half of Orlando Furioso, she isn't just wielding any lance, but the golden lance we know as the Trap of Argalia, the lance that Rider Astolfo uses. Sadly, she doesn't get that here, and she really should too, because Bradamante arguably makes even better use of it than Astolfo does. Bradamante can also qualify for the Rider class. She regularly fights on horseback, briefly had the Hippogriff, and when she trades the Hippogriff to Astolfo, she gets both his lance and his magic horse Rabbicano. Now Fate says if she was summoned as a rider, she would get the Hippogriff, but, well, there's a problem with that I'm going to talk about later. Now if Rider Bradamante was given Astolfo's horse, that could work. Anyway, Lancer's a good choice for Bradamante, but Rider would be too. Getting into her character design, Bradamante is not quite how she usually appears in artworks. Bradamante is a powerful female knight in the service of Charlemagne, and is regularly depicted wearing heavy armor. Indeed, when she first met her love interest Ruggiero in Orlando Innamorato, he didn't even know Bradamante was a woman until she removed her helmet. Obviously, the Bradamante we get in FGO isn't in full armor, far from it in fact. And unlike Roland or Kynus, Bradamante doesn't have some special power that makes her mostly immune to harm. They did get her hair color right though. Bradamante is said to have golden hair and an angelic appearance, probably why she gets that halo-looking thing in her third and final ascensions. Something else we can point out is the color of her clothes, that light blue and white. Bradamante and Ruggiero are said to be the founders of the House of Este, an Italian noble family who ruled the city of Ferrara in the 16th century, and who are also the patrons of both Matteo Maria Boiardo and Ludovico Ariosto, the authors of Orlando Innamorato and Orlando Furioso respectively. If you look at their family sigil, it's a white eagle on a blue field, white and blue, like the clothes Bradamante is wearing in FGO. Overall, while Bradamante's design does give shoutouts to her mythical version, I find it to be flawed due to the lack of armor. Bradamante is a warrior who gets into the thick of the action. She should at least have some proper armor, but I guess fan service was the higher priority. And if you think fan service wasn't a priority for Bradamante, you clearly haven't seen her MP animation, not yet at least. Moving into her skill set, Bradamante's first skill is Clermont's Merit, referring to Bradamante's heritage as a member of the House of Clermont, though as I said, she and Ruggiero would later found their own dynasty. Bradamante comes from an old distinguished family of knights and rulers, including her older brother, the paladin Rinaldo. Rinaldo, or Rinald de Montauban, is a major character in Carolingian legend, and one of its most deadly warriors. He could potentially be a servant someday, perhaps a rider since he has a magic horse named Baya. Because Bradamante's ancestors and especially her older brother are such excellent warriors, she trained extensively in order to reach Rinaldo's level as a combatant, becoming a formidable warrior in her own right. Bradamante's second skill is White Feathered Knight, a custom version of the battle continuation skill that is meant to represent Bradamante's persistence and determination. I'll be getting into the full details of it once I get into her backstory, but Bradamante was very dedicated to being with Ruggiero. It's just that the plot was just as dedicated to splitting them up at every opportunity. Honestly, it gets a little ridiculous, but again, let's save that for later. So this skill makes sense for Bradamante, her sheer persistence and commitment. As for the skill's name, it is a reference to the sigil of the House of Este, the noble family said to be descended from Bradamante and Ruggiero. I mentioned before that this family sponsored the two authors of Orlando Innamorato and Orlando Furioso, and, well, they're not exactly subtle about praising their patrons. There are multiple moments where you inexplicably get a vision of the future that shows off the descendants of Bradamante and Ruggiero, talking about how they are all amazing and wise rulers, according to the author that they paid to write this. Of course, a few centuries later in 1796, the House of Este would be deposed by some 26-year-old Corsican, someone whose name nobody remembers and could never hope to match the glory of the House of Este. Lastly, Bradamante's third skill is Magecraft Removal, which later gets upgraded to Angelica Cathay during the 8th anniversary. This skill, especially when it gets its upgrade, refers to a magic ring found in both Orlando Innamorato and Orlando Furioso, and it's actually one of Bradamante's MPs. Originally it belonged to Princess Angelica of Cathay, the one that Roland lost his mind over. Bradamante's brother Rinaldo also was infatuated with Angelica, though he didn't go streaking like Roland did. Anyway, this ring not only has the power to negate magic, it can also turn its wearer invisible. This ring would change hands at least half a dozen times during the story, ultimately ending up back in Angelica's hands. Bradamante is one of the people who came into possession of the ring, and she would use it in her battle against the wizard Atlanta to negate the power of his attacks. Not only his spells, but also something a bit more special. Bradamante's noble phantasm is Bouclier d'Atlanta, the Shield of Atlanta, whereupon she stuns her enemies with a beam, then offers some fan service as she charges forth with her shield to slam into her foes. This MP is a curious choice for Bradamante, because she didn't actually use it. As the name implies, it originally belonged to the wizard Atlanta, who had captured Ruggiero, but who was also Ruggiero's adopted father. Using Angelica's ring to negate his magic, Bradamante defeated the wizard, seized the shield and the hippogriff from him, and freed Atlanta's prisoners, including Ruggiero. But moments after this, Atlanta would use his magic to get Ruggiero onto the hippogriff together with the shield, and soon he was flying off into the distance, leaving Bradamante to have to go look for him, again. Later on in the story, Ruggiero would end up in a battle where the shield's power was unwittingly unleashed, immediately blinding and incapacitating all three of the knights that were attacking him. But after seeing this, Ruggiero threw the shield down a well, thinking that it was too overpowered. Kind of a waste if you ask me. Anyway, while the shield's power is well depicted, this isn't really a good MP choice for Bradamante since she never actually used it herself, though she did fight against it. Honestly, Trop of Argalia would be a better choice for Bradamante, but Astolfo has that, so I guess she's not getting it. It's a shame too, because Bradamante makes impressive use of it in Orlando Furioso. Bradamante's craft essence is Angelica Cathay, depicting a fancy ring. This is the same ring mentioned in her third skill. All of the things I said about the ring earlier pops up in the C's text, as well as a few extra bits, about how both Roland and Bradamante's brother Rinaldo were pursuing Angelica, and a comedy bit where Bradamante wonders if she is becoming like Astolfo, since he has a tendency to use other people's items as his own MPs. But, well, Bradamante's Fate MPs, the shield, this ring, the hippogriff, even my proposal that she get Astolfo's golden lance, Bradamante isn't the original owner of any of those either. Bradamante's Valentine C is Hippo, featuring some hippogriff chocolates. As the C's text says, these might be too cute to eat, but what about its lore? Well, I did mention before that Bradamante gets the hippogriff if she is summoned as a rider, but much like the shield that serves as her Lancer MP, it was Ruggiero rather than Bradamante who actually rode the hippogriff. She did briefly pick it up after being freed from the Enchanted Mansion, only to immediately trade it to Astolfo. So while it is said that if Bradamante was summoned as a rider she would get the hippogriff, it, like the Shield of Atlanta, would actually be better suited for Ruggiero. And now for characterization, starting with a look into the legends surrounding Bradamante. Bradamante is the daughter of Duke Aemon, and the sister of Rinaldo, one of the 12 paladins. She serves as a knight under Charlemagne, and while she isn't actually one of the 12 paladins, she might as well be considering how capable Bradamante is in a fight. While her father and brother appeared in earlier tales of Carolingian legend, Bradamante didn't show up until Orlando Innamorato and Orlando Furioso. Bradamante is one of the main characters in these two poems. Though, okay look, I try my best to be even-handed in these backstory sections, but her story gets ridiculous, and not in the fun way like it does with Astolfo. While this probably was intentional, Orlando Furioso is basically a parody of chivalric romances, there is such a thing as a joke dragging on for too long. Basically, Bradamante's story centers around her wanting to be with Ruggiero, but, well, let's start the count on how many times they get separated or something tries to keep them apart. Here we go. We first meet Bradamante in Orlando Innamorato, as Muslim armies are marching into France. She fights together with Charlemagne's army, engaging in 2 duels with Rodomante, king of Algiers. She manages to hold him off, but then word of Charlemagne's retreat reaches them, compelling Bradamante to fall back as well. But when Rodomante decides he's not going to let Bradamante go, another warrior from Rodomante's own side jumps in and fights him. This allows Bradamante to escape, but she soon returns, wishing to express her gratitude to the warrior who had intervened on her behalf. After Rodomante withdraws, Bradamante and her benefactor finally meet properly, and she learns his name, Ruggiero. Now, you might be thinking, Bradamante, Ruggiero? These don't sound like Muslim names, much like how Orlando, Rinaldo, or Bradamante don't sound very French. Well, the thing is, our authors didn't want their readers to struggle with unfamiliar names. They were writing an Italian poem in Italian for Italians, and so they gave every character Italian names, even if it makes absolutely no sense. We will encounter this again when I do a video on the Muslim king of the Tatars and emperor of Mongolia, Mandricardo. No, geography doesn't make any sense in these stories either. Anyway, moving on. This first encounter is the start of a budding romance between the Christian knight Bradamante and the Muslim knight Ruggiero, though Ruggiero was initially shocked to discover that it was a woman underneath all that armor. The two are then attacked by more Muslim warriors, getting separated from each other. Ruggiero ends up with Mandricardo, while Bradamante runs into a lady named Fior di Spina who falls madly in love with her, believing Bradamante to be a young man. This is when Orlando Innamorato ends, on account of its author Matteo Maria Boiardo suffering a mild case of death. It would be up to Ludovico Ariosto to continue the story in Orlando Furioso. Shortly after Furioso begins, Bradamante ends up being tricked and falls into a cave. Inside, she meets a sorceress named Melissa, who tells her that this cave is, in fact, the tomb of Merlin, the place where he was imprisoned by Vivienne. The spirit of Merlin even says hi, telling Bradamante that Ruggiero has been captured by the wizard Atlante, and that, if Bradamante wants to save him, she needs to steal a magic ring from Brunello, the ring that once belonged to the Princess Angelica. Bradamante acquires the ring, then faces off against the wizard Atlante, who she defeats, takes his shield and hippogriff, and frees his prisoners, including Ruggiero. But then Atlante uses his magic to get Ruggiero and the shield onto the hippogriff, then flies him off to parts unknown. Ruggiero soon finds himself bewitched by Alcina, the sorceress that had turned Astolfo into a tree after getting bored of shagging him. Bradamante gives the magic ring to the sorceress Melissa so that she can help free Ruggiero again, only for Ruggiero to run off again. First to the sorceress La Gestile, then a run-in with Angelica where he saves her from a sea monster, and then he gets trapped again by the wizard Atlante, this time in his enchanted mansion.
I feel like we've been here before. Have we been here before?
Bradamante tries to find Ruggiero, but without the ring that negates magic, she too gets trapped in Atlante's enchanted mansion. Technically, Bradamante and Ruggiero are in the same place, but they don't actually know it thanks to all the illusions. Have I mentioned that we aren't even halfway through Orlando Furioso yet? Our pair of perpetually separated lovebirds remain stuck in the enchanted mansion until, suddenly, the whole place is destroyed by Astolfo, who also wandered into the enchanted mansion, but then used his various gadgets to shatter all the illusions. Bradamante and Ruggiero reunite and talk about getting married, though Bradamante says that Ruggiero would need to convert to Christianity first. The pair are then attacked by some knights on the road, and proceed to get separated again. These are the knights who get blasted by the shield, by the way, only for Ruggiero to throw this super useful item down a well. Separated yet again, Bradamante goes back to where that enchanted mansion was. She doesn't find Ruggiero, but she does find the hippogriff, and Astolfo. She then trades the hippogriff to Astolfo in exchange for his magic horse Rabbicano and the Golden Lance, the trap of Argalia that knocks people off their mounts with a single hit. Bradamante then rides off, only to find herself at her family's castle. She tries to sneak away, but her family finds her and drags her into the castle, since they now have plans to marry her off to the son of the Byzantine Emperor, Prince Leo. But while stuck stewing at home, Bradamante hears that Ruggiero has been seen with another female knight, Marfisa, and Bradamante immediately assumes that naughty things are happening. They're not. Marfisa had found Ruggiero wounded and decided to help him out, but Ruggiero did shag the sorceress Alcina, and even tried to assault Princess Angelica after rescuing her from the sea monster for some reason. So perhaps Bradamante's worries aren't entirely unfounded. Bradamante decides to escape her home, find and kill Marfisa, and then have Ruggiero kill her, to punish him for this imagined infidelity. She rides to where the Muslim army is encamped, which Ruggiero has since rejoined, and sends a challenge telling Ruggiero to come out and fight. Since Ruggiero didn't actually cheat on Bradamante with Marfisa, he has no idea why someone is challenging him, much less that Bradamante is the challenger. After dismounting a bunch of knights who came out in Ruggiero's stead by using the lance she had gotten from Astolfo, Marfisa then goes out to meet Bradamante. After dismounting Marfisa with Astolfo's lance, the two get into a bitter duel until, finally, Ruggiero comes out, words are said, and misunderstandings are cleared up. Not only the misunderstanding that Ruggiero has shacked up with Marfisa, but, in fact, that would be incest. A ghost pops out, and it turns out that Ruggiero and Marfisa are twin siblings. and the ghost telling them this is their mother, because this whole scene just so happens to be taking place at their mother's grave. Can I skip to the end now? Please? No? There's still more? Oh my god. More fighting happens, the Muslim king Agramante is killed by Roland, the war is won, and now it's finally time for Bradamante and Ruggiero to get married. Except not, because Bradamante's family doesn't approve since Ruggiero is a Muslim. And also they have already arranged her marriage to that Byzantine prince, Leo.
Oh my god, this is happening again.
Bradamante then conspires with Charlemagne, getting him to declare that Bradamante can only be married to someone who can defeat her in a duel. Wonderful. Now she can duel Ruggiero and deliberately lose so they can get married, right? Except Ruggiero already ran off to go kill Prince Leo. He fails, gets captured, and Leo, impressed by Ruggiero's skill, asks him for a favor. Because, you see, Prince Leo is supposed to marry this lady named Bradamante, but he needs to be able to beat her in a duel. Since Leo isn't confident that he can do that, can he, Ruggiero, serve as Leo's champion and win that duel for him? Yes, really. Ruggiero now gets to be the champion to help Leo win Bradamante as his bride. This he does, but then more words are said, Leo learns what's going on, and he's actually cool about it, deciding to go home and allow Bradamante and Ruggiero to marry. So are they actually getting married now? No, Ruggiero has to become a Christian first. Fine, okay, that won't take long and he was gonna do that anyway. So now can they get married? Yes they can. Bradamante and Ruggiero get married, there's a big celebration, and everything is happily ever— wait, someone's crashing the wedding.
Oh my god.
It's Bradamante, the guy both Bradamante and Ruggiero fought at the very beginning of this story. Remember him? Bradamante is mad at Ruggiero, calling him an apostate and a traitor. But by now even Ruggiero is tired of all these interruptions, so he challenges Bradamante to a duel and stabs him in the eye. There. Now they can live happily ever after. Except they can't, because the wizard Atlante, who was also Ruggiero's adopted father, the reason why he locked up Ruggiero is because he had a prophecy that Ruggiero would be betrayed and murdered shortly after his marriage to Bradamante. So no, there actually won't be a long-term happy ending, despite all of the madness we just went through. Okay, that's it. We're done. No, really, the story is over now. Hooray!
No, seriously, you have no idea how old that got.
So now that we've gotten through all of that, we can now talk about the Bradamante of Fate Grand Order. We first meet Bradamante in the 4th Christmas event, where she is trying to find— gee, I wonder who. You know, maybe Bradamante and Ruggiero just aren't meant to be. I can't fault Bradamante for her dedication, but oh my god, this is absurd. Anyway, since she can't find Ruggiero and the villain Black Quetzalmask has stolen her power, she instead teams up with Quetzalcoatl to do some lucha libre. She is initially wary of Chaldea because of her bad experiences with mages like Atlante, but then she picks up upon the connection between Merlin and Foe, and since Merlin helped her out in Orlando Furioso, your party's past association with Merlin convinces Bradamante that Chaldea is trustworthy. It is then said that she is one of the 12 paladins of Charlemagne. She wasn't, but honestly this is just a nitpick. Bradamante might as well have been one of the 12 considering how good of a warrior she is. Another thing that comes up is that, when fighting against Hector, she remembers that Ruggiero is apparently a distant descendant of Hector, something Ruggiero told Bradamante when they first met. Now, it comes up in Bradamante's interlude that she is also a descendant of Hector, but this isn't found in the legends. Back to Christmas 4, there is a moment where Bradamante pretends to be defeated, only to surprise and defeat Ivan the Terrible. Bradamante actually used a tactic just like this to defeat the wizard Atlante, pretending to be in much more trouble than she actually was. As for Bradamante's FGO personality, she is very earnest and always trying to do good for others, but she is also a bit dim, someone who is easily fooled or doesn't seem to think things through, like how Bradamante suddenly freaks out when Quetz puts on a mask, thinking that Quetz is the person who attacked her, despite the fact that, Bradamante ought to have recognized Quetz's outfit first, or the fact that later Martha is able to pretend to be Quetz and somehow Bradamante doesn't pick up on it. It's passed off in game that Bradamante's head is in the clouds because she's so fixated on finding Ruggiero. I'm okay with this. Bradamante in the myth wasn't necessarily dumb, but she wasn't exactly famed for her logic either. See that whole episode where Bradamante hears Ruggiero was seen with Marfisa, and she immediately assumes that Ruggiero has abandoned her for Marfisa, in spite of everything the two of them have been through together. Aside from the 4th Christmas event, we meet Bradamante again in the 5th Christmas event, though only very briefly as she hangs out with Astolfo. Bradamante also makes an appearance during Lost Belt 6.5, Traum. where, despite being a knight of Charlemagne, she's actually fighting for the reinstatement realm rather than the righteous realm. Bradamante believes that the cause to reinstate Popus Johanna is a proper one, and so she is helping them out. Thankfully, Charlemagne is a cool guy, and so is okay with Bradamante doing this. And since, after the fall of the reinstatement realm, Bradamante and Popus Johanna end up joining the righteous realm anyway, you could say it all worked out. To be perfectly honest, Bradamante doesn't stand out that much in Traum, being little more than an established character who helps introduce the new character of Popus Johanna. As for the future, I can't say for certain, but it is my understanding that Bradamante has more character moments to come, specifically in the Chaldea Boys 2026 event for us NA players. We've gotten to know Bradamante a bit, but she hasn't seen too much screen time since her initial appearance in Christmas 4. It's still more than other FGO characters, but I think Bradamante's full potential is yet to be utilized, largely due to the fact that we don't have Ruggiero as a servant in FGO, yet. And now for the verdict. What grade would I give Bradamante's depiction in Fate Grand Order? Well, her character design isn't so great, clearly having chosen fan service over being faithful to the character. I know I should expect that, but could she at least have some armor? Her skills are a mixed bag as well, or rather her MPs are. It seems like they decided to give Bradamante MPs like the shield and presumably the hippogriff for her rider form that would have been better suited for Ruggiero. True, she did interact with both of these items, but only very briefly. I'd hardly call them core parts of her legend. As for characterization, it's better, but I think Bradamante suffers by not having Ruggiero around. FGO players only know that she is chasing after this guy, not anything about who he actually is. Ruggiero could end up in FGO someday, though we have a problem that, like how Astolfo has the lance that Bradamante should also have, Ruggiero has a good claim to both the hippogriff as well as Bradamante's shield. How are they going to deal with that? Are we going to end up with multiple different servants wielding the same MPs? Or are some characters going to go without? It's a problem for Fate that is perhaps unique to Carolingian legend, that so many pieces of gear traded hands throughout those stories. Bradamante's depiction in FGO isn't terrible, but it is flawed. It's probably too late to do anything about her MP, but if she got a costume with proper armor and gave us Ruggiero as a servant or at least a major story appearance, that would give us a clearer picture of who Bradamante was in the legends. Formidable, determined, and still a complete nut like everyone else in Carolingian legend. And so for a final grade, I am going to give Bradamante, the White-Feathered Knight, a C-. If you would like to learn more about another character who is endearing and kind to others, check out my video on Percival here. Until next time,